Okay, so maybe we'll get started. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Eric. I'm one of the writing specialists. I'm also an ESL specialist who works in SALS. And if you're not sure about SALS, SALS is the Student Academic Learning Services. So really it's academic support for students. If you run into any trouble with your academics, so it could be writing, it could be language, it could be learning skills, or it could be some subject matter that you're struggling with, then we always say your professor is your first point of contact because they're the people giving the grades and designing the assignments. But as another option, additional option, you can also visit us at SALS. And we'll talk more about SALS a little bit later on so you understand more clearly. And I'll let Leslie, my colleague, introduce herself.
All right, good. I was going to say good afternoon, but it's still good morning. My name's Leslie, and I'm a writing specialist in SALS. And Eric and I have adjoining offices. We're presently speaking to you from the Student Services Building at the Oshawa campus. And welcome to the workshop. Thank you for signing up and attending. And we hope you find the information we're about to share with you valuable and helpful as you continue your studies at DC. And we also have a colleague here, Danelle, who is going to be keeping an eye on the chat and keeping attendance, because we're anticipating that there may be other people who join throughout the workshop. Thank you, Danelle, for your help. Okay, so we'd like to start the workshop with a land acknowledgement. You may have seen these before or heard the term before, but basically it's an opportunity for whoever's doing a presentation or a class to acknowledge the land that we're teaching and learning and living on today. And Durham College is located on the lands of the peoples of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. And so we'd like to acknowledge that and really give thanks to the Indigenous people who cared for and still continue to care for the land that we're living and teaching and learning on today. Eric's going to go through an overview of the workshop just so you have an idea of what's coming up.
Great. So today we're going to talk about, first of all, your professor's expectations. So if you're new to Canada or new to Durham College, you may be wondering what your professors are expecting from you. And as we go through, we'll discuss some of the professor's expectations. We'll talk about the types of academic writing that you might encounter in your programs. We'll also talk about, or actually we have a video with a former international student's perspective on success at Durham College. And so it's a short video, but it's an important one. We'll also spend quite a bit of time talking about academic integrity, just so that it's really clear and your understanding of academic integrity is strong, so that you can feel comfortable going forward and not have any problems. We'll then talk about some success strategies, things that you can try as you're going through your program, especially now when things are new and perhaps a little confusing. So these are some strategies that you could apply right now to help you get through this first early sort of uncomfortable period, if it's uncomfortable for you. Then we'll also talk about how you can get help if you're struggling in any way. Okay, so let's start off with the professor's expectations. So if you think about a professor and student, college student or university student relationship in Canada versus the same type of relationship in your home country, I think you'll notice some differences. And so that's what I want to talk about here. So take a look at what these are, and then just see if you have the same, you would have the same experience in your home country, or perhaps it's quite different. So one of the things that's important that your professors are expecting from you is that you are responsible for your own learning. So an example of this would be if you missed a class, and you shouldn't expect your professor to follow and check on you and say, contact you and say, are you okay? Did you get the materials? Did you get the assignment? They probably won't. I think one way of thinking about your college experience is thinking about it as a full-time job, that you're preparing for a full-time job. So you're using the kind of language, the kinds of relationships that you have with your professors, like your boss. Your classmates are like your colleagues. Your grades are like your salary. Okay. And so if you think about it like that, managing your time and being responsible. Okay. So that's one example of what's going to be expected from you. You'll also be asked to have a strong academic integrity. And integrity means honesty. And so this is something that I'm sure you'll relate to, but you may have questions about. And later we'll spend some time talking about that and hopefully answer your questions. And by the way, as we're going through the workshop, please feel comfortable to ask questions if you have them, because we understand that we're trying to cover information that you might be wondering about, but at the same time, you might have a question that pops up. So if that happens, then don't hesitate to put your question into the chat window, and Danelle will make sure that we've got it. Okay. The third expectation is to be able to work well in groups and individually. And again, this is similar to a work environment. Once you graduate from Durham College and go off into the workforce, you'll be expected generally to work in groups. And your groups will be made up of diverse people from different backgrounds, different language groups. And so it's important for you to practice those skills of group work, and as well as working individually. Follow the assignment instructions and rubrics. So a lot of times the professors are very good at giving instructions very clearly. You may have already noticed that in your programs. When you get an assignment, you'll often see steps in your instructions. So step 1, you have to do this, step 2, step 3. They'll tell you how many grades, step 1, how many points will you get for step 1, and so on. So they're very good at giving clear instructions. However, you should always ask questions if you're not certain about the meaning of the instructions. They will also give you something called a rubric. And if you're not familiar with a rubric, it's kind of a grading scheme, a grading system. It shows you for each assignment how the grades are divided. And I'll just give you a quick example. So this is part of a rubric from an assignment. And you can see on the left column is the criteria, what part of the assignment this grade is for. So in this case, this grade is about the writing. So, how's the grammar? How's the spelling? How's the tone? Is it professional or is it casual? Is it appropriate for the situation? And then you can see if you want top grades for this category, 4 points, these are the things you have to do. If you only do the next column, if you're doing this 1 to 2 spelling or grammar mistakes, then you could expect maybe 3 points. And it goes down. More grammar mistakes will be 2 points, and so on. So of course, students are naturally looking at the far left column. They want the maximum grades, always, naturally. I understand. But you can use a rubric like a checklist to kind of check and make sure you did this. Rubrics are really good at giving students a hint about what the professor is looking for. And so if you use a rubric, I would also recommend reading the other points, the other levels, even the 0, because these are things that you want to avoid. And so the professor, that if you avoid these problems, you'll maximize your grades. Okay. Improve your communication skills. So if English is a second language for you, or a third or fourth language, additional language, then you know that it's tricky to change your tone. You have your conversational tone, you have a professional tone as well, and you might not be sure how to create the professional tone. So that's okay. That's something that you're working on while you're in college. You don't have to be perfect at this now or with anything. You're learning. So, but this is something that you'll be expected to keep improving your communication skills. Develop your critical thinking skills. So an example of critical thinking is a lot of times in programs, especially in other countries, memorization is really important. You have to remember a lot of information, and when the test comes, you have to get all that information out in the right order. However, memorization is important in this education system as well, but critical thinking is also important. And critical thinking would be, for example, in your class, if you've studied about example A, and then you understand how it works and what to do, and then the professor gives you also example B, and you work through it and you understand it clearly, and then you have a test, and you think, okay, which is it going to be, example A or example B on the test? And you open the test and you see example C, and you think, what's this? I've never seen this before. What's going on? But the idea here is that you use your knowledge and your skills from example A and B and apply them into example C to solve the problem. So using those skills that you learn from doing A and B, you can apply your critical thinking skills and solve the issue for example C. So that's what it means by critical thinking. If this is something that you haven't done a lot of in your education, you'll have time to develop that skill here, but I just wanted you to be clear that that's going to be something that you'll have to apply. Submitting your work on time. This may seem like a simple thing, but especially when you're using DC Connect, the cutoff time is often going to be Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. So 1 minute before midnight, 1 minute before Monday. And if you're late by 1 minute, the actual submission window could close. And if it closes, this means that you won't be able to submit the assignment, or you'll have to contact the professor separately and ask if you can submit. But really try not to leave it to the last minute. Make sure that you start your assignments early. And that way, if you have questions, you have time to ask questions, you have time to complete them and get them in on time. Ask questions when you don't understand. So this is something, you know, if you're coming from your home country, most people in their general life, they're quite comfortable. They know what to do. They know what's expected of them. Then when you come to a new country, suddenly you're not sure what's expected because the rules are different often, whether it's in society, outside, or in your classes in college. So if you have anything that you're wondering about, don't hesitate to ask questions. Even any student should ask questions. This is a normal thing. The professors don't expect you to have the knowledge. If you already have the knowledge, you don't need to be in the program. But asking questions can really help, because the other thing is if you didn't understand part of it, the professor is moving on to the next part that's building on the last part. If you didn't understand that, then you'll quickly fall behind, and you don't want to do that. So make sure that you become comfortable. If it's not easy for you to ask questions, try to make it more easy for yourself. Just open yourself and ask questions. And then finally, your professors want you to be successful. They expect you to be successful in your program. If you're at the point in this, you know, we're in week 3 right now, and you're not sure you're going to be successful, and you're thinking, oh, I don't know, it's just too much. And but you have to change your mind and believe that if you're doing everything the way the professor asks you, and you're doing your best at all times, there's no reason that you won't be successful. Okay, so we expect it, your professors expect it, and you should also expect it. Okay, are there any questions? Just remember, you can ask questions in the chat window at any time. That's fine. Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Leslie right now, and she's going to talk to you about the types of writing that happen in Durham College in the program.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eric. You know what would be really helpful is if the participants could type, if you could each type your program name into the chat, please. I'm going to talk to you about academic writing and what kinds of writing you can expect to see, but if I know which program you're going into, I can probably give you even more specific information. Oh, that was quick. Okay, good. Thank you. So we've got project management, behavioral science technician, computer programming, environmental health and safety. Wonderful. Okay, so science-y, business-y. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so, and Danelle also put a note, oh, and paralegal. Okay, wonderful. So Danelle also put a note and a document into the chat. It's a form that you can use to take notes during this workshop. It's certainly not a requirement, but you might find it helpful to take some notes as we're going through the information. So first of all, welcome to Durham College, by the way. I forgot to mention that when we were doing the opening. I'm glad you're here and taking some time out of your probably very busy schedule to learn some information that we hope will be beneficial to you. So when we're talking about academic writing, and again, it's helpful to know which programs you're going into, there are different types. And the first one is really short writing assignments. And short writing assignments might be things like summaries or emails or short paragraphs. You may have already experienced this where your professors will want you to write a short introduction about yourself and post it to DC Connect, or give you practice writing a professional email. Typically, and this is a very general statement, typically the shorter the assignment, the fewer marks it's worth. And oftentimes you'll see them more towards the beginning of your program, where it's just to get you comfortable with the writing process and introduce you to academic writing at college. So you may have seen those already. If not, you can expect to see some of those. Some of you will also be doing essays, less so in the business programs and science related programs. But if you're taking general education courses, and maybe you're not in this semester, but down the road in your program, you can expect to write essays, and you probably have experience writing essays. The essays may be sort of your standard 5-paragraph essay. Sometimes they involve research, often they do. And Eric mentioned that there are rubrics. That's where for sure you want to look at the rubric and what is being asked of you. The rubrics will give you, as Eric mentioned, hints and clues about what you're expected to do and the format and so on. So that's another type of academic writing you'll likely see. Reports. This would be for business-related programs, so project management, you'll be doing reports, IT-related reports, and lab reports or technical reports. The difference between reports and essays, one difference is that reports use headings and subheadings to organize the information and make it more reader-friendly, where essays often you're trying to prove something, oftentimes have a thesis statement that you're trying to back up and support. So reports are usually used in sort of business and technical type fields. And as I said, they're using headings and subheadings to organize the information. Another type of report, and I would say this would be in the behavioral science technician, you might see this client documentation, where you're expected to maybe observe someone's behavior and document what occurred at specific times, what you observed, not your opinion, but what you observed. So there may be that kind of client documentation. There also might be documentation for customers. So you might see this in project management, for instance, where you're documenting clients' needs and then providing them with information that they can use to present to their boss, for instance. Usually with client documentation, the format will be presented to you. Your professor will have like a template almost to follow. And the reason that you may have this in your college assignments is that this client documentation is what's going to be expected in the workplace as well. And Eric mentioned that college, one of the big goals is to prepare you for work. And so having this practical experience with doing client documentation is another thing that you can expect to see. Presentations. We've put it under academic writing because presentations, you have to write the presentation, but you also have to structure it in a way, just like other writing, where it's understandable to your audience. So you've got an introduction, you've got a body, and you've got some sort of a conclusion. And with presentations, you also have transitions, right? Connecting the ideas together or moving from group member to group member. So presentations may be, you may have a fair amount of presentations in your programs because again, that might be an expectation in the workplace where you have to be able to present your information and ideas to others. Another type of academic writing is reflective writing. And I'm trying to think, in your programs, possibly behavioral science. Well, you all might be doing reflective writing. Reflective writing is where you are given questions, and maybe the first question might be, discuss an experience where something happened. So an example that I've seen quite regularly is where students have to reflect on a customer service experience, for instance, and they have to maybe write about a bad customer service experience where they experienced bad customer service. And they tell the story briefly about what happened. And then they're given questions that get them to think about, so why was this experience bad? What did you learn from this experience? How would you do it differently? And so it may not be customer service necessarily, but reflective writing is where you're asked to think about an experience that you've had, or think about if your professor has given you a video to watch or an article to read, and now you have to reflect on what that means to you. And when you're doing reflective writing, you're going to use I. Okay, so most of these other types of writing, you're not going to use I, but a reflective piece, if your professor says do reflect on or write a reflective paragraph, they expect you to use I to discuss that situation and what it meant to you. And the last type of academic writing is that I want to discuss are DC Connect posts. And so DC Connect is our learning management system, and your professor may have you participating in online discussions with your classmates. And these DC Connect discussion posts sometimes count for marks, sometimes it's just to keep you engaged with the material and your classmates. But it could be that your professor posts a question or a little scenario, and then they're expecting everyone to respond. And then they're often expecting you to respond to other classmates' posts. Okay, so this might happen in paralegal, for instance, where you are given a current event. You're asked to read about a current event and then present your thoughts on that event or how it relates to the paralegal profession, for instance. And the idea is that you're engaging with each other. So you're doing your own discussion post, but then you're also maybe discussing with a classmate and asking questions so that there's a discussion occurring amongst people. Okay, so those are the types of academic writing that you can expect to see. Eric mentioned before about critical thinking. And so some of these are very straightforward. Find the information, here's my answer, or look for the information, here's my answer. Much of this also involves critical thinking, where there isn't a correct answer necessarily or one right answer. It's how you present the information and following the assignment instructions. So are there any questions about the types of academic writing you might expect to see? Okay, please, we encourage you to ask questions. There's a lot of information. Okay, thank you. A lot of information we want to share with you, but we want to make sure we're sharing information that's valuable to you and making sure that it's clear. And please don't hesitate. You'll hear us say it at least 20 times in this workshop. Don't hesitate to ask questions. Okay, thank you.
And one additional point I'll say, if any of these types of writing come up in your program and you've never done it before, don't hesitate to ask the professor for an example. You know, if it's like a client documentation, usually if it's something related to your field that's specific to your program, they will show you examples naturally. But if you ever encounter a type of writing you haven't done before, and the professor is not offering an example, then just ask for one. And usually they'll be able to show you an example of what's expected. Okay, great. So we're going to just watch a very brief video from a former international student. He actually worked with us in SALS. He was hired by SALS as a peer writing tutor. So we had him with us last year. And he really wanted to give a message to new incoming international students. So I'll just let you listen. It's a very short video, but just take a listen and see what he says.
Hello everyone, I'm Saurabh, an international student with the Artificial Intelligence Graduate Certificate Program in Durham College. Let me share a few tips with you which will help you in smoothly transitioning to academic life at Durham College. I would like to talk about a few things where you have chosen this program and you have already taken the most important step of becoming inquisitive and improving or succeeding in your life. At Durham College, everyone is poised to see you succeed and strives really hard so that you reach the zenith of your career through Durham College. However, be mindful of the fact that you are responsible equally for your success. The fact that you have to put enough efforts and time to learn new things, while all the help will be provided to you, still you are responsible to manage your time, you are responsible to embrace changes, you are responsible to submit your assignments, and you are responsible for your learning. That is what DC stands for. You have everything, but you just need to strive hard. You just need to assimilate whatever is given to you, and take my word, Durham College will help you succeed in your life. And Durham College will be one of the cornerstones in your learning as well as your career. With that, welcome to Durham College and all the best.
I love Saurabh. He's really great. Okay, so yes, after Saurabh's message, we're going to turn now, and we've talked about all the professors' expectations, and we're just going to focus a little bit on this one, the academic integrity, and Leslie's going to talk you through that.
Perfect. Thank you, Eric. So one of the reasons that we like to share this information with new international students is that it's important to understand what the expectations are and what your responsibilities are when it comes to completing your studies in an honest way. And it could be that much of what I'm about to tell you is the same as your home country, but it could also be that some of this information is new. And we know that new students, whether international or domestic, students who are new to Durham College, most people don't know this stuff. They may be taught it early on in their program, but we want to give you this information early on so that you have the best possible chance for completing your studies successfully. And so we've already talked about what your professors expect. We've talked about the types of writing that you can expect to see. And so now we want to focus, and it's going to be around 20 minutes or 25 minutes talking just about academic integrity. So when we talk about academic integrity, it means academic honesty. And this is a definition straight from Durham College's academic integrity policy. And it states that it refers to the pursuit of scholarly activity in an open, honest, and responsible manner. And I always like to remind people, international, domestic, it doesn't matter, that college is not meant to be easy. If it were easy, everyone would have a college credential. It's meant to be challenging at times. It's meant to be enjoyable, stimulating, but it's not easy. And so there aren't shortcuts to getting a college education. And so everyone is responsible for following the rules, but you as a new student may not know what all those rules are. So I'm going to highlight some of them for you. And keeping in mind that expectations and even the penalties for breaking the rules can vary from country to country or school to school and country to country. So if you have previous post-secondary experience, there would have been a policy at your institution, whether it was in Canada or elsewhere. But it's important to understand what the expectations are here and what you're expected to do and follow, and understand what your rights and responsibilities are as I said, so that you can complete your studies in an honest way. And at any point through what I'm about to tell you, but also when in your studies, it's important to be really clear and ask questions if you're not sure what's being asked of you, if you're not clear about your responsibilities or your rights. Okay, so as I said, you'll hear us say that a few times. So in the policy, and every institution in Canada has an academic integrity policy. Our policy refers to breaches, and breaches are situations that happen where students break the rules. So I'm going to highlight 6 breaches that are listed in the policy. There are more, but I'll just highlight 6 and tell you what they mean, and we'll talk about why they're serious and what you can do to avoid having breaches. So one type of breach is copying another person's work. And I mentioned already that college isn't meant to be easy. There aren't shortcuts. Everyone is responsible for doing their work. And really, when you graduate, there's one name on the diploma or certificate or degree. And so you can't copy someone else's work. Everyone is responsible for doing their own work to earn that credential. Another type of breach is using unauthorized materials during an evaluation. So you want to listen very carefully when your professors are giving instructions for tests, for instance, or demonstrations or presentations or whatever the case may be. If you're being evaluated, listen carefully for what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So they may say to you, yes, during this test, you're allowed to bring in your course notes, or you're allowed to refer to your textbook, or you're allowed to have note cards during your demonstration. If they say no aids are allowed or no materials are allowed during a test or any other evaluation, then you're not allowed to use them. And that would be considered a breach if you did. Another breach is collaborating without permission. And so there are going to be situations, and Eric already mentioned this, where you're expected to work in groups. That's college, and that's also work and it's life for that matter. But there are going to be situations where your professors do not want you to work together. And so again, listen really carefully. Are you working with a partner? Or a group? Are you sharing the work? Are you submitting one assignment or doing one presentation? In that case, you're expected to share work. You're expected to share materials. However, if your professor says, okay, Eric, Leslie, and Danelle, I want you to read this article, and I want you to summarize the article separately, individually. So we're all reading the same article, and that means we're each individually supposed to summarize it or reflect on it. That means we're not allowed to collaborate. That means we're not allowed to share our information. The same thing can happen in labs, where maybe you're doing an experiment together and you're taking the measurements. So let's say Eric and Danelle were working on an experiment together. They're both recording the results. Now the professor may say, okay, I want you to submit one lab assignment, both of you together with both your names on it. Or they may say, okay, Eric and Danelle, now you've done your measurements. Now I want Eric to write his lab report. Danelle, I want you to write your lab report. And that means you're not allowed to share information with each other. You've both got the same results, but now you have to explain them on your own. Another type of breach is what's called contract cheating. And that's where people will buy or sell or exchange material to gain some sort of academic advantage. And these are file sharing websites where sometimes people buy papers or exchange papers with other people. Again, there's no shortcut, right? Everyone is responsible for doing their own work. So contract cheating, whether it's money or not, is a very dangerous practice. It's worldwide, we know that, but it's one of our breaches, and it can get you into some serious trouble if you engage in it. Another type of breach is submitting the same work in more than one course without permission. So it doesn't happen all that often, but there are situations where you may be given an assignment topic and you are interested in that topic in first semester, for instance, and you complete an assignment. And then in second semester, you are given a similar topic and you want to use some of that information from your first semester assignment and you want to use it in your second semester assignment. What you want to do is check with your professor. Okay, don't assume just because it's your work that you're allowed to reuse it. You have to get permission first because that assignment has already been evaluated and it's already stored in a database, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So you want to always get permission. So this goes back to ask when you're not sure, okay? And then the last type of breach I want to tell you about is plagiarism. And plagiarism is when you don't acknowledge where you got information from and make it look as though you're trying to present it as your own. So if there is a breach or a suspected breach, this is also in the policy, your professor will want to talk to you. Okay, they'll probably send you an email. They may, probably an email saying, let's discuss this. Okay, if you get an email like that, don't ignore the email. You want to have that opportunity to discuss it. You want to find out what happened. Your professor wants to hear from you what happened, and you want to have an opportunity to present your side of the story. Okay. So if your professor, though, believes there has been an academic integrity breach, they will complete an academic integrity alert form. You'll have an opportunity to write comments on the form, and that's what I mean. You want to not ignore the message if your professor wants to speak to you about it. That form then goes to the dean, and the dean then looks into it. What happened? Were there unusual circumstances? They may want to speak with you. They may want to speak with the professor. They're investigating what occurred. If they determine that a breach has occurred, then they will assign a penalty, okay? And some possible penalties, and again, this is in the policy as well, one penalty may be to attend a academic integrity workshop that SALS runs. That's not a really awful penalty in my opinion, because at least you're getting the information so that it doesn't happen again. It's meant to be sort of an educational opportunity for you. There are other penalties where you may be given an opportunity to redo the assignment. Again, that's not a bad penalty because yes, maybe it's going to be more work, but at least you're not getting a 0 on it. However, there are other penalties where it does impact your grades more seriously. You could get a grade of 0 on the assignment. In some situations, you could even get a grade of 0 in the course. And you see the last two, being suspended from your program or being removed from the college for 2 academic years. That's a first breach. Now, those last couple are very, very serious, and it would have to be a very serious situation that occurred. You don't want to get into this situation, obviously. And if there are second and third breaches, the consequences can be even more serious in terms of fewer and fewer options. So this is why it's important to know this information now, so that you are informed about what your responsibilities are. So academic integrity breaches, one thing is they're dishonest, right? Whether you're copying from someone else, cheating on a test, going to a file sharing website, and so on, it's a dishonest act. They can also impact Durham College's reputation. We want to maintain a high academic standard. And again, there aren't shortcuts. When you have that credential that says your name and Durham College on it, we want employers to know that you worked hard to get this, and we don't want to become known as that school where students cheat, okay? So we want to maintain a high academic standard. Breaches can also affect your credibility, your reputation. I'm sure you don't want that. There are situations where you can't get professional designations. In some situations, more extreme situations, with academic integrity breaches on your record. They can also lead to gaps in understanding course material. So if you are trying to take a shortcut and you're copying from someone else or copying and pasting from the internet and you don't really understand the material, there are going to be gaps, and that's going to pose a problem for this current semester, for this current assignment, but also down the road, because you're not going to be able to apply what you've learned from first semester to second semester. These can have implications on your future career. Again, there are some professional designations and some disciplines where these academic integrity breaches can have an impact on receiving certain credentials in industry. And obviously these breaches can cost you time and money. I don't imagine most of you want to repeat a course and pay the fees for that. I'm sure you don't want to have to repeat a semester. It can be very costly. So just make sure you're clear about what's being asked of you. And if you're not, ask questions. Okay, so when we talk about plagiarism, and I'm going to spend a fair amount of time talking about it, it's one of those academic integrity breaches. And basically it's defined as the unacknowledged use of another author's words or ideas. And there are different types of plagiarism. I won't go into all the various types, but they're all considered breaches. So if you're not acknowledging another author's words or ideas, that's considered plagiarism, okay? Sometimes it's very intentional. If you go onto a website and you just copy a huge quantity of information, or even not a huge quantity, information, copy, paste it into an assignment, submit it, that's plagiarism because you're not acknowledging where you got that from. If you do acknowledge it, but maybe you make some mistakes with acknowledging it in referencing, then that may be an unintentional incident of plagiarism. But in both cases, whether you did it on purpose or it was accidental, students are still responsible for following the rules. And again, this goes back to, and I'll say it again, it goes back to asking questions if you're not sure, okay? Am I supposed to reference this? Is this how I do it? Can I get help with this? Professor, I just have some questions, okay? So some risk factors when we talk about plagiarism, and in fact, when we talk about academic integrity breaches in general, one of the biggest risk factors is procrastination. And does anyone know what procrastination is? It's a bad word. It's a common word, but it's a bad word. If you want to type into the chat, if you know what procrastination is, or procrastinating. Okay, do you want to type in what it is? If you know, what is it? I will tell you, I'll also fill in any gaps. Merce, if you have an idea. Delay to do
Yes.
something. Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good
Yes,
job.
it's when you leave a work like you have for like 2 weeks, you leave the work for the day before.
Very
Delay
dangerous,
and
isn't it? Exactly.
Yeah, it is.
It is. And sometimes human nature's like that, right? We just go, oh, I've got too many I'll do it later. I'll do it later. I'm sure I'll have time. And then all of a sudden now, as you said, it's due tomorrow. Sometimes it's not that you're being lazy. Sometimes it is laziness. Sometimes it's that you're just putting off something maybe that isn't as pleasant as you'd like it to be. But sometimes, honestly, it's that you haven't allowed enough time, right? You've put it off and then you've underestimated how much time there is. But procrastination is one of the big risk factors, because if you don't have enough time to do it properly, or you delay starting something, then there's going to be panic, right? Then there's going to be stress. And then you're going to go, oh my gosh, I'm desperate. I have to get this finished. Another risk factor is struggling in class. So if you're having a hard time in a particular class, you may, again, get desperate. You may try and do things that you've never done before, asking a classmate, copying from someone else, copying and pasting from the internet and so on. If you're having difficulty in class, that's another risk factor, because maybe that next assignment is a higher stakes assignment and you're worried about it more. So you might do something that you wouldn't normally do. Rushing your work. So this relates to time management and procrastination. But if you're trying to do something last minute, or you're not allowing enough time to check your work, that's another risk factor for sure, that maybe something is going to go wrong, even accidentally. Another risk factor is not tracking your research. I'm going to share a resource that will help you keep your research organized so that you can avoid this problem. Another risk factor is that you may not know all the rules for referencing. So I'm going to touch on referencing, and I mean really touch on it. It's going to be 2 minutes, where normally it takes at least about an hour to get a good grasp of it, but I'll touch on it. And if you don't know the rules for referencing, then that can be a risk factor, because maybe you make an unintentional error. Okay, so how is plagiarism detected? Well, one way is that your professor has lots of experience in understanding how students write, what students typically sound like, okay? And even they start to get familiar with how your writing sounds. And so much like everyone has a particular voice when they're speaking, so a particular pattern to their speech, certain vocabulary they use, maybe an accent, maybe errors that they make, grammar errors, that's your voice, that's your speaking voice, volume, etc. So you have a writing voice as well, and that's your style, that's the way you write. So you have certain sentence structures that you use, certain vocabulary, again, maybe certain errors that you make. And if your professor sees your writing and they become comfortable or familiar with how you normally write. Let's say I'm a professor and I'm looking at Danelle's writing and I see, well, Danelle usually writes in very short sentences, or she likes to use very technical vocabulary in her writing. And then I'm looking at another piece of Danelle's writing and I see that it doesn't sound like Danelle's normal writing. Maybe it sounds more like it's coming from a textbook. Maybe it sounds more like it's coming from an expert in the field. Well, I know that Danelle's a student. Sorry, Danelle. I know that Danelle's a student, and I know that she's not an expert in the field yet. So I'm looking at her writing going, that doesn't sound like Danelle. Okay, so your professor starts to learn what your voice is, and they, from experience, get to see, I'm concerned about this. There's a little alarm going off. Maybe this isn't Danelle's writing. Another way it's detected is through plagiarism detection software, and Durham College has a license to Turnitin.com. And you may have heard about this before, but Turnitin.com is a massive database, billions and billions of pages of content on this database. It's used by institutions around the world. And when you submit your assignment through DC Connect, then it's usually, and I won't say always, but it's usually getting checked through Turnitin.com. And so this software uses pattern matching to compare your work to the work on its database. And so if you have referenced the information correctly, then it's not going to come back as plagiarized. But if you just put and don't acknowledge where you get information from, then Turnitin is going to go ding, ding, ding. This looks like it's being copied from somewhere else. Okay, so now we just want to ask you a question, and we're going to do a poll. There are 4 scenarios that are about to be presented, and I want you to look at them and see if you think this is plagiarism or not. And so the first one is you provide all the correct links to the sources, which are websites you used at the end of your document. So in a minute, you'll have a chance to choose which ones you think are plagiarism. The next scenario is you have to submit a 5-page report. You copy one section from a classmate who has better marks than you do. But since you've written most of it on your own, you think your professor will be okay with it. The third one is you attend a workshop and are asked to write about what you learned. So this would be a reflection. You and your friend talk it over and discover you had some of the same ideas about the workshop. After meeting with your friend, you each write your own reflection. And lastly, you have 2 assignments due tomorrow. Oh, procrastination, I guess. One is a discussion post worth 2%, and the other is a report worth 10%. You go online and you find a blog post that you really like. You copy it, change a few words, and then submit that as your DC Connect discussion posts worth 2% just before the deadline. Okay, so 4 scenarios. Eric's going to launch the poll and decide which ones you think are plagiarism. And for sure, there can be more than one. Okay. And don't worry about making mistakes. You're not getting graded on this. This is just for participation. Just want to see what you think. Good. So we've had 2 people answer and 3 people. Excellent. Okay, I want to give it another 20 seconds or so. So we've had 4 people answer. How many people do we have in here? So 1 more maybe. Okay, Eric, we'll end the poll, I guess. Okay. Oh, good. We got 5. Wonderful. Thank you. So 5 out of 5 of you think that submitting a 5-page report and copying from your classmate is plagiarism. You're absolutely right. Even if you change the words, if you're collaborating without permission or copying from someone else, that's considered plagiarism. Okay. The first one, interestingly, none of you chose that. That one is also plagiarism. It's a different type of plagiarism because, as you'll discover in a minute, just providing the links at the end of a document isn't enough. That's not acknowledging where you got the information from. So I'll show you how you have to do it correctly, but the first one is also plagiarism. The third one is not plagiarism, because although you discussed it with your classmate and you said, oh yeah, I really liked that workshop. Oh, I didn't like this part of the workshop. If you separately, you talk it over, but now you separately go and write your own reflections, that's not plagiarism. You're each including your own ideas, you're expressing it in your own way. You're not collaborating at that point, you're just discussing the workshop after the fact. Okay, so, and then the last one, 3 out of 5 of you thought that that was plagiarism. In fact, it is. You can't just copy and paste information, change a few words, and then call it your own, okay? So the instances of plagiarism are 1, 2, and 4. Okay, so 5 out of 5 on number 2. That one's, I think, an obvious one as well. You can't copy from your classmate, but just keep in mind the other ones as well, and I'll talk to you about how to avoid that. Okay, so one way to avoid plagiarism, and this is especially with the referencing part, is you want to take research notes. And after this workshop, by the way, we're going to send you some resources that we're talking about in this workshop, and this will be one of them. And the idea with the research notes form is that you are recording using one of these forms per source. So if the paper asks you to use 3 sources or 5 sources, you would have 5 different research notes forms. It's a way to organize your information. So in the box that says source information, that's where you're going to put the author, the date, the title, the link, and so on. Then you've got the 3 columns down below, page, notes, and plan. The page number is self-explanatory. If it's coming from your textbook or an article and so on, you're going to write the page number. In the notes column, that's where you're going to take your notes. And the notes are either going to be point form, which you'll later turn into sentences, which you still have to reference, but you're just going to take point form notes, or you're going to use quotation marks around information and copy it word for word. In the notes column, it's important to get the information down, because you're thinking later, I want to use this information in my paper. And so now that's where the plan comes in. This is where you're sort of outlining in your mind and on paper where you might want to use this information. If you take the time to take research notes and start your assignment early, so not procrastinate, it's going to be very hard for you to plagiarize, very hard, because you've taken the time to think about the information, document where it came from, and think about how you want to use that information. So if you've been given a research assignment, start with the research. Don't think, oh, I don't know how to start, I don't know how to start. If it's a research paper, you need to research, and the research notes form is a really good tool to use. So this is a little bit about referencing basics. Remember, one of the risk factors for plagiarism is not knowing the rules for referencing. And I'll tell you that if you are in, hold on, I'm just going to go back up to your programs again. Actually, maybe I'll just talk about this first, and then I'll tell you about the referencing styles. So referencing is required in 5 situations. So do you remember that plagiarism poll where nobody chose that providing a list of links at the end is not plagiarism? And it is plagiarism. If you just provide a list of links at the end, that's considered plagiarism, because you also have to do what are called in-text citations. And in-text citations are in these 5 circumstances. So every time you include information that you copy word for word, put quotation marks around it, don't change the words, put quotation marks around it, copy it exactly, and then reference it. Now, you can't go crazy with quoting. You can't just go quote, reference, quote, reference, quote, reference. But it won't be plagiarism, but it's not really writing. So if you're going to quote, save it for those situations where it's like a very memorable way of the author writing the idea. So it might be a definition. It might be part of a theory. It might be something that you think is very well written and that you don't want to change the words. But with quoting, you can't just, or with writing in college, you can't just quote everything and reference it, because you have to use your own words to explain things, and you have to paraphrase in some situations. Okay, thanks, Tamara. We're going to have a recording of this available later on. So if you want, you can email us and reach out to us to get that recording. So another time you have to reference is when you paraphrase, and paraphrasing is when you put things into your own words. So not copied word for word. So that, again, you have to reference. The third situation is when you summarize and you're putting the main ideas in your own words. The fourth situation is when you include statistics, and the fifth is when you include images. So again, from that plagiarism poll, just providing the links at the end, that's not enough. Every time within your document that you do one of these 5 things, you also have to reference. And I'll show you how to do that. So if you're in, I'm just going to go back up to the programs again. If you are in project management, behavioral science technician, computer programming, and environmental health and safety management, you are likely using APA citation style. Okay, anything science related, business related, they're going to use APA. And when we send you the resources after the workshop, we're going to send you the APA guide that you can follow. Don't try to memorize it. You can follow the guide to do your referencing correctly. So an in-text citation in an APA looks like this. Here's a statistic I included. I copied the information word for word from Statistics Canada, and I put quotation marks around it. And then immediately after that information, I told you exactly where it came from. The author is Statistics Canada, the year is 2020, and I got it from page 1. So that is called an in-text citation. The second example is a reference. And so that goes at the end of your paper, listed at the end of your paper, all the sources that you used. Again, the author, the date, the title of the thing, and the link. So both pieces are required. It's not enough to just give the list of sources at the end on your references page. You have to do your in-text citations throughout your document. Okay, we won't worry about MLA because no one in here is going to be using MLA. The paralegal student, you're going to be using something called McGill, and your professors are experts in that. I am not, for sure. It's a very specialized citation style used for paralegal and law clerk. The concept is still the same though. It's quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing statistics and images. You're going to have to reference that, and you'll use McGill to do it. Okay, so just listen for those words, McGill citation style, and your professors will tell you all about it. Other ways to avoid plagiarism, make sure that you are starting your assignment early. Don't wait till the last minute, as we know, very dangerous. Secondly, use your rubric. We've talked about this before. Following the assignment instructions, asking when you're not sure, making sure you're clear about the research requirements and the referencing requirements. Thirdly, ask your professor. Okay, that's a theme. We've mentioned it many, many times. Be sure you understand your topic and use clear language when you're discussing it. Sometimes what happens is students who have English as a second or additional language want to, they think maybe their language is too simple and they want to use synonyms or fancier language. Make sure it's language that you understand, are comfortable using, and you know you're using it correctly. So use clear language. There's no prizes awarded for using confusing sentences, okay? Develop your skills in summarizing, paraphrasing, quoting, and referencing so that you can feel more comfortable incorporating those into your writing. Do your own work. Don't copy from other people, right? Everyone is responsible for doing their own work. And that leads into don't share your files. So even if your friend says to you, please, Eric, I'm desperate. Can you please share your work with me? I'm struggling in this class. I'm worried I'm going to fail. I can't fail. I can't repeat the course. It's too expensive. Please, can you send me your stuff so I can just see what you've done? And Eric, even though he's a good friend, he's going to say no. He's going to say no because he's going to get into trouble potentially if he shares his work with me. Okay, so everyone is responsible for doing their own work. Don't share your files. Don't ask other people to share their files. And look at the final product. If you're doing a group project, don't just assume your group members have got it right. If your name is on that group project, you need to look at it and make sure you're comfortable submitting that assignment with your name on it. Okay. Any questions about academic integrity? It's a lot of stuff.
So I just want to take a moment and show you inside MyDC some additional supports for academic integrity just while we're talking about it. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen, and then I'm just going to pop over to the other screen. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so if you visit MyDC and then you look under learning resources, so actually on the MyDC homepage, and then you can go down to the learning resources just there. And once you're in here, there's several resources that might be helpful to you as you're just starting your programs. So as I said about academic integrity, there's some documents and support in the form of a toolkit with lots of different resources for you. The library is also in here, has some information. And then SALS, if you click there, you can find out a little bit more information about SALS and how it works. Okay, so just so that you know that inside MyDC under learning resources, you can find additional supports there. Okay, let me just pop back to the presentation. Also, if you're interested or curious, Durham College, so Leslie was talking a lot about the academic integrity policy at the college. If you visit this link, the durhamcollege.ca/policies, you'll see a whole list of all of the policies. And these are all for employees and for students alike. And so if you're curious about what kinds of policies, what's there, you can see them all at that link. So we're going to, you're already in your 3rd week. So we're hoping that you are prepared, but let's just ask the questions. So visiting, these are the things that you can do if you haven't already, just to be thinking about to make sure you're on track. And so visiting MyDC, the learning resources we just talked about, getting familiar with DC Connect. So if it's still a challenge for you, if you're not sure about it, I'll mention another resource that's helpful in a few moments. But that's an important part of, because all of your course material, your communication with classmates and your professor is all done through your courses inside DC Connect. So it's something you need to be aware of. Review your course outlines and course materials. If you haven't already, your course outlines are produced by each of your professors in each course. And they tell you in week 1, in week 2 and 3 and so on, what assignments are coming, what kinds of things you need to think about. So it's really good for planning. Purchasing your textbooks, of course, getting organized, making folders for each of your courses, some way to organize. And if you're struggling with your organization, that's something that you could contact us at SALS about, and maybe meet with a learning specialist or take a workshop to help you understand more about getting organized and time management. Okay, we have a number of tips that we're recommending for international students who are just starting out in their programs. And so you can take a look, see what might be helpful. Okay, so we'll just start with those right now. The first one, and again, this is coming back, is not procrastinating. You know, especially if you have gen eds, you'll notice that your gen ed courses, if they're online, they don't appear in your timetable. So making time for any online learning, your readings, your discussions, class preparation, your research, your writing, you know that if English is a second language for you or additional language, that it takes much more time to write and to read and to process the language that you need. So not procrastinating is going to be really important for you. Attending classes and being on time, whether they're in person or online, you'll know that you need as much information as possible, especially at this time of year, to understand what the professors are expecting, the style of teaching, the style of assignments. So it's really important for you to attend your classes. Checking DC Connect every day for new information, notifications, new course content is sometimes the professors will release each week just at the end of the previous week. So staying on top of that one. Check your DC mail every day. Professors, and in fact, any member of the college, any staff member in the college will only communicate with you by DC mail. So if you're using another type of email, in fact, when we receive a message, when the college receives a message from Gmail, for example, it's flagged as a potential spam. So you know, it's a little bit dangerous. Sometimes the college filters might actually filter that out. So make sure you're using DC mail to communicate by email. Follow your assignment instructions carefully and use the rubric. We mentioned this earlier. Very quickly, I had a student last year who was doing an assignment, and he said that the requirement was 300 words, and he was at 500 already. And he said, I don't know how to make this smaller. So he showed me the assignment, and I asked him to read the first instruction again. And he said to write about medical conditions so he was a nursing student, and he had to write about medical conditions that he wanted to research. And he had written about 3 of them. And I asked him to read the instruction again very carefully, and he read it again, and he noticed that it said write about a medical condition, so meaning one medical condition. So immediately he felt like he'd wasted time, and he was upset about it. And I said, well, it's a good learning opportunity, and you've researched a few extra medical conditions, so that's not bad. But yeah, following the instructions very carefully can be important. It can save time for you. And again, asking questions when you don't understand. You notice that we're really pushing this point because it's so important for your own success, because you're responsible for your learning. And improve your skills and learn from your experiences. These are, you know, if you are studying in your native language, naturally you will have an expectation for your grades. And you may well have the same expectation in English, but you'll find that there's some little things about English that will surprise you or trick you, or you might miss some points, or you might not be able to explain it clearly in English the first time. So learn from that, improve your skills, and access supports as you need them, and talk to your professor. Make sure that the professor knows that you might be struggling, and take their advice and feedback. And recognize when you need help. And if you do need help, reach out, ask questions, ask for help. Again, your professor could be the first point of contact for getting help. SALS could be another, but there are more sources of help, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, I just want to run another quick poll, different poll this time. This is on choosing from these success tips for new international students, which 3 do you think will be most important for you personally? So everybody might have different answers, but I'm just curious, for you personally, which 3 of these success tips will be the most important for you for this semester? Okay, so that's 1 person. Two, 1 more. Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll just share the results. And we can see managing your time, attending your classes, everybody agrees that's important, and I do as well. Checking your DC Connect every day, checking your DC mail. Yeah, everybody's got some different ideas here, but honestly, all of them are important, and it matters. The most important part is that you try these things and see what you find most helpful. But okay, that's great. All right. And I mentioned about getting help, further help, and if that's something that you want, again, professors are the first point of contact. They're the people who design your assignments and assign the grades for your assignments. They know best. However, sometimes because they have so many students, you might need additional support. So you can always turn to your student advisors if you're not sure where to get help. If you have to add a course, drop a course, never drop a course without checking with your student advisor, because sometimes the course that you want to drop is a requirement for next semester to enter. So it could be, for example, a Communications 1 level course, and next semester is Communications 2. And if you dropped Communication 1, you won't be able to enter the second one, the second communications course, until you complete that. And what if that course is only available in September? That would be a disaster. So you want to make sure that you check with your student advisors before making any changes to your timetable, your schedule, your courses. The library is another source, especially for referencing, great source of information. As Leslie mentioned, we're going to be sending you a package of some documents, including the library guides for APA and MLA citation styles. Study groups, so having a study buddy or a study group of your classmates, so you're all learning together. Make sure that you share your knowledge. Sometimes if you explain, if you have learned something and you explain it to your classmate, it really makes that information more concrete for you and more solid and easier to remember. And it confirms your understanding of it. But for your classmate, or if somebody explains something to you, sometimes just hearing it from a different perspective in a different way can help reinforce the material. As you're all learning together, it makes sense to form little groups of friends, classmates that you can work together to share your understanding. MyDC, the learning resources that I showed you a little bit earlier, and then SALS Online and SALS. So Danelle is going to be sharing a survey link with you in a few moments, but the survey, you can, if you wouldn't mind filling it in for us, it'll take maybe 2 or 3 minutes. It's just feedback for us about this workshop, and if you found it helpful or if you have any suggestions, that kind of information, that would be really helpful. Okay, but before that, what we'll do is we'll just take a moment and I'll talk about SALS, just to explain what some of the services are, and I think Leslie's going to explain this part here.
Definitely, thank you. So you can see our contact information down at the bottom, and we encourage you to reach out to us really at any stage of your learning at Durham College. If you need language support, which you can see on the right-hand side, so there's English as a second language support, and that covers academic writing, which I'll talk about in a second. Acculturation, which is helping you understand Canadian culture and also Canadian academic culture. And Eric can work with you to help you learn about Canadian culture and Canadian academic culture and give you strategies for adapting to it. We also have help for pronunciation and vocabulary development. So likely if you have English as a second language, you'll be seeing Eric, but you don't even have to remember our names. All you have to know is contact us. Below, I'm sort of doing this in a strange order, but below English as a second language, we also have peer tutoring, and peer tutoring is where students who have taken the class already can tutor other students who are currently taking the class. And students can apply for tutoring to receive support from their peers. You don't pay them. The students, the peer tutors themselves, though, do get paid by the college. Something to keep in mind for you in subsequent semesters is to apply to be a tutor. But the tutoring happens starting this week, actually. We're starting to run peer tutoring for different programs and different courses. Above English as a second language, we have learning strategies, and this relates to time management, study strategies, test and exam preparation, ways to overcome procrastination, strategies that really apply to students in any program. And whether they're international or domestic, they're those skills that students need to be as successful as possible. And a lot of these things we aren't taught in school, so maybe you need some strategies to learn how to study more effectively, or to take good notes, or to manage your time, and so on. And then above that, we've got writing skills. And writing skills covers academic integrity. It also covers writing at any stage of the writing process. So it could be understanding what's being asked of you in an assignment, all the way through to sort of brainstorming ideas, coming up with a focus, research, referencing, editing skills. And I'll just highlight that we will not edit your work. So sometimes students think that they can bring their paper to CELS or meet with us and we will fix mistakes. We can't do that. That's an academic integrity issue, actually. We can't do that. So we want to work with you to help you develop your skills. And so we can use your writing and look at a paragraph or a page or something of your writing and use that as a tool to help you understand what you're doing right and also where you could make some improvements. And so it could be that it's grammar errors. It could be that it's APA referencing mistakes. And we will work with you to help you learn how to identify those mistakes and teach you how to fix them. So it's a process. It's not a quick solution. And where I typically work with students who have English as their first language, Eric helps with writing, amongst other things, vocabulary, pronunciation, and so on, with students who have English as their second or additional language. But again, you don't have to remember our names. You just have to contact CELS and say what you need help with. Over on the left side, you'll see we have subject supports at the top, and those cover things like math and chemistry and biology and physics and accounting. And so if those are areas that you might need support with, we have both staff support as well as peer support. And I should have mentioned this at the beginning. If you look at the colors that we have on this diagram, you'll see that the purple color, the maroon, means it's with a staff member, with a specialist, okay? The green means it's with a peer, and the orange means it's at your own pace. So depending on which section we're looking at, if it was subject support, you have the option of looking at subject supports with a specialist or with a peer. And in fact, going further down, also through CELS Online. And CELS Online is where we have, through DC Connect, and I think Eric's going to show you the login in a second, we have CELS Online units, we call them, that will help you with science and math and accounting and academic writing and learning strategies. And so looking at the, Eric's going to talk to you about, or am I doing it? Oh, no, I'm doing it. Am I doing it, Eric? I'll do it. Okay. So when we talk about accessing support, there are a number of options. It's appointments with staff, it's with a peer, it's online through workshops and tutorials for subject-specific support, and then CELS Online. To register for CELS Online, you would go on to DC Connect, and you've probably seen this icon before. On the right side of DC Connect on the homepage, look for that little icon that says register for resources, Success Matters, start here. You would click on that, and then it would bring you to a page that lists many CELS Online units, amongst other things. There's also something called Library Online. There's probably the International Student Orientation information. But if you're looking for CELS Online information, it will start with CELS Online. CELS Online Academic Integrity, CELS Online Academic Writing, CELS Online Navigating DC Connect, and so on. If you're interested in registering for CELS Online, all you have to do is click on the blue link, and within 10 seconds, 4 more clicks, you're registered in CELS Online. And in CELS Online, we call them units, by the way. We don't call them courses. Courses, you've already got enough courses. We want to tell you that these are resources to help support you during your studies. So if you've registered for CELS Online, you would just click on, you would go back to, your manually managed terms. So do you see where it's underlined there? So you've got your fall 2022 courses, each with an icon for DC Connect. And then you've also got manually managed term. You might have to use the arrow to scroll through. That's where you'll see all the ones that you've registered for, like CELS Online Writing, CELS Online Learning Strategies, CELS Online Chemistry, whatever it is that you're looking for. And so once you're registered in CELS Online, and we'll go with the academic writing one, once you're registered in CELS Online, academic writing, for instance, you're going to see our home pages all look the same. There's going to be information about how to contact us and so on. Now, within the writing one, on the right-hand side, you'll see that we have a list of workshops that are coming up. And these workshops, and I only quickly mentioned this before, these workshops happen online. You can sign up for as many of them as you like. And they go into, they're about 50 minutes long. And you can see the description there. And then there's an Eventbrite registration link. Just click on that, and then you'll attend the workshop through Zoom exactly the same way as you're joining this workshop today. And as I said, you can sign up for as many of them as you like. So if you want to know more about APA, you may want to come to the workshop that's happening on Thursday. If you want to know more about punctuation, we've got a punctuation workshop happening tomorrow. So look at the workshop, look at your schedule, see what meets your need and what fits your schedule, and sign up for as many of them as you like. Okay. They're not for marks, they're totally optional, but they're for your benefit, right? To help you out as you're completing your studies. In addition to the workshops, if you go into content with any of the SALS Online units, that's where you'll see our resources. And don't be scared off, we have hundreds, 371 writing resources. You're not going to need them all, and you're not even going to want to look at them all. But within SALS Online Academic Writing, you'll see a welcome module that sort of explains things for you. And then you'll see that we have workshops that you can actually complete online at your own pace. So maybe the punctuation workshop that's happening tomorrow doesn't fit your schedule, but you can actually do the punctuation workshop through SALS Online and still get the same information and do it at your own pace. So some people prefer this because it gives you more time to go through things. And so on. And for both workshops, whether it's online, remote, or at your own pace, you can earn a certificate of completion. So sometimes professors will ask you to complete a SALS workshop, and that's how you would do it. You would do it through SALS Online Academic Writing or SALS Online Learning Strategies. Okay, you can also use the search bar in SALS Online to search for something. So let's say you wanted to know about essays. You could type in essay and it will show up the resources that we have related to essays, okay? Or you could type in commas or whatever, and it will bring you to resources that we have. We also have within SALS Online Academic Writing, we have quizzes to help you practice your skills, punctuation, grammar, and so on. Not for marks, just for practice. And we always have feedback in those quizzes to give you, so that you're learning and developing your skills. Okay, so lots and lots of resources and good information to help you develop your academic writing and English language skills. Okay, I see we're down to 2 people, 2 keeners. You might have class as well. We're almost finished. Okay. I think that's it for SALS Online and our services. And Eric, do you want me to just talk about the social media and then? Okay. So we also have, we encourage you to follow us on our social media channels. We post helpful tips. We share information about peer tutoring and other things that can help you as you progress through your semester. So follow us on Instagram and Twitter, or check out our YouTube channel. Lots of really good resources in there. And then finally, our contact information. It's also on the service diagram, but also sals@durhamcollege.ca is probably the best way. Check out our website, check out the learning resources. Come to us in person. We're located in the Student Services Building on the 2nd floor, room 204, so down the hall from the International Office, or at Whitby campus in room 1-10. I think that might be it. Do you have any questions for us? We still have 5 minutes. Any questions at all?
No, I don't have. Just would like to thank you.
Okay. Did you find the information helpful?
Yes, definitely.
Wonderful. Well, good
Thank
luck in
you
your
very
program. And if you can fill
Thank
in the
you.
survey, that would really help us.
Yeah,
We
sure.
will. Wonderful. Thank you.
Just
And
to find the
watch-
time. Sorry, we are just.
I know it's
overwhelmed.
only going to take a couple of minutes, but I know what you mean. It's a busy time in the semester.
Okay.
We also will be sending you some resources that we've talked about in here, so keep your eyes out for those. We'll send them to your DC mail.
All right, that's great. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Yes, thank you. Do you have any questions? Is it Vibev? No? Okay, it looks like you're on campus as well somewhere. I can see people behind you. You're in a, that's good.
Looks like
Well, thank you.
the Gordon Willey building, I'm guessing.
Ah, good detective work. Have a wonderful semester, both of you.
Thank you.
Bye, Julia. Thank you.
Bye bye
Thank you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, we all lost.